My name is Jolene, and I'm 35 years old. I remember the exact moment my entire world collapsed. Not because of the job loss, but because of what happened after. I had worked at Harrow Financial Solutions for 11 years. 11 years of early mornings, skipped lunches, and covering for colleagues who never once said thank you. I was a senior accounts manager, the kind of employee who got birthday cards from the CEO and thank you emails forwarded to the whole department. If you truly love and appreciate your parents, take just 1 second to subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to us. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? And then on a Tuesday evening in October, my manager called me into a glass-walled conference room and told me the company was restructuring. My position was being eliminated. They handed me a folder with my severance paperwork, shook my hand, and that was it. 11 years gone in 12 minutes. I drove home in a daze. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, running through calculations, thinking about bills, wondering how long my savings would carry me. I lived with my parents at the time, not because I couldn't afford my own place, but because my father had a heart procedure the previous year, and my mother had asked me to stay close. I gave up my apartment, moved back into my childhood bedroom, and quietly became the person holding everything together. I paid the utility bills. I covered the grocery runs. I fixed the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink because my father's hands shook too much to hold a wrench. I didn't complain. I thought that's what family was. When I walked through the front door that evening and told my parents I had lost my job, I expected shock, maybe some concern. Instead, my father looked at my mother and something passed between them. A look I didn't recognize at first. Then he stood up from his armchair, walked down the hall to my bedroom, and I heard the sound of my closet being opened. I followed him and found him pulling my clothes off their hangers and folding them into a suitcase he had already pulled out from under the bed. I stood in the doorways and asked him what he was doing. He didn't look at me when he answered. He said, "Your sister needs this house more than you do." Just like that. Not "I'm sorry this happened." Not "let's figure something out together." Just "your sister needs this more than you do." My sister Ranata was 31, had never held a job for longer than 8 months, and had been living in an apartment across town that our parents had been quietly subsidizing for 2 years. I knew this because I had seen the bank transfers on a shared account I had access to. I never said a word about it. My mother appeared in the hallway behind me. I turned to her, genuinely believing she was about to say something to stop this. Instead, she crossed her arms and told me I was old enough to handle things on my own, that Renata had a baby on the way and needed stability. That was the first I had heard about any baby. No one had told me. I was the one living in the house, cooking dinner 3 nights a week, and no one had thought to mention that Renata was pregnant. Then Renata herself walked in through the front door. Apparently, she had been called before I even arrived home. And the first thing she said, before hello, before any acknowledgement that I was standing right there watching my father pack my belongings, was, "Who's going to pay my car loan now?" That was her first sentence. Not "are you okay?" Just, "Who's going to pay her car loan?" And my mother nodded. Like that was a completely reasonable thing to say. I stood very still. I felt something shift inside me quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep. I did not cry, I did not raise my voice. I thought about the utility bills I had been covering, about the job offer in Seattle I had turned down 2 years earlier because my mother said she needed me close. I said nothing. My father finished packing the suitcase. My mother handed me my car keys from the hook by the door, like I might have forgotten where they were. I picked up the suitcase, walked to my car, put the bag in the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, looking at the house I had poured 2 years of my life into holding together. Then I drove away. What none of them knew was that 3 years earlier, I had quietly registered a small property holding company and under that company's name, purchased a beach house 40 minutes outside the city. It had been my exit plan, built slowly and carefully, one transfer at a time. I had never told anyone because there was never a reason to. Until now, there was still no reason. But that was about to change. I drove to the beach house that night with one suitcase and no plan beyond getting through the next few hours. The road was mostly empty. No one was calling to check on me. My phone was completely silent the entire 40-minute drive. That silence told me everything about what the last 2 years had actually meant to the people I had sacrificed them for. The beach house was a 3-bedroom property I had found through a foreclosure listing 3 years earlier. I had been saving quietly for years, putting money into a separate account no one knew existed. I registered the holding company, named it Clearwater Ridge LLC, made the purchase, and never mentioned it to a single person. A property manager handled the occasional rental. The income went straight back into the maintenance fund. It was mine, entirely and quietly mine. That night, I carried my suitcase inside, turned on the kitchen light, and sat at the small wooden table by the window looking out over the dark water. I made coffee because it was the only automatic thing I could think to do. I sat there until almost 2 a.m., not crying, not panicking, just thinking with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I was no longer performing loyalty for people who had already decided I was expendable. The next morning, I called my former colleague, Iris, who had left Harrow 8 months earlier to start her own financial consulting practice. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, then said she had been waiting for me to leave that company for 3 years, and asked if I wanted to come on as a partner. I told her I needed a week to think. I spent that week at the beach house, walking in the mornings, sleeping properly for the first time in months. By Friday, I called Iris back and said yes. 3 weeks passed before my mother called me, not to apologize, but to ask if I could help Ranata set up a baby registry, because Ranata was having trouble with the website. That was the call that broke the 3-week silence. I told my mother calmly that I wasn't available, and I ended the call. My father never called at all. Ranata sent me one text asking if I was still paying the streaming subscription we shared. I canceled it that same afternoon and felt something close to satisfaction. The consulting partnership with Iris moved faster than either of us expected. Within 2 months, we had signed 4 clients. By the 5th month, I was earning more than I had at my previous job. By the 8th month, I had already started thinking about the next property. Around that time, my Aunt Phyllis, my father's older sister, came to visit me at the beach house. She was the only person in the family I had told where I was living. She sat in the same kitchen chair I had sat in that first night, looked around, and told me that Ranata had moved into my old bedroom, that the arrangement was already showing cracks, that Renata's partner had left, the baby was due in 6 weeks, and my parents were now paying for everything, because Ranata had quit her latest job. My mother had apparently wondered aloud to Phyllis if Jolene might be willing to help out a little. Phyllis said she was sorry she had taken so long to check on me. I told her it was all right. I meant it. I never went back to that house. Not to help, not to visit, not to prove anything. The beach house was not a trophy. It was just a place that had been waiting for me to need it. And when I finally did, it was enough. My parents threw me out on the worst night I had known in years. They never asked where I went. They never knew about the company. And they never knew about this place. Some things you build quietly for yourself alone, and you never owe anyone an explanation for surviving.